I was in the basement workshop, sanding down a massive, reclaimed mahogany door for a historic renovation. When the baby monitor I used to listen for front gate deliveries crackled to life, I'd left the main receiver on the kitchen island upstairs. I was expecting a courier with permits from the city. Instead, I got the voice of my husband Julian and my younger stepsister Chloe. "If she reviews the quarterly ledgers before Thursday, we're dead," Chloe said. Her voice was a nervous, high-pitched hum. She sounded breathless, frantic. "She won't," Julian replied. I could hear the smirk in his voice, the ice clinking in his glass. It was the smooth, polished arrogance of the man I'd been married to for 4 years. Jacky's so busy playing the gritty, blue-collar contractor, she hasn't actually looked at the raw corporate accounts in months. I put the Southside loan documents in her inbox this morning. She'll sign them without reading, just like she always does. "And the transfer?" Chloe asked. "Ready to go," Julian said, confidently. "The second the bank clears the $5 million against her company, I wire it to the LLC in Malta. By the time she realizes the money is gone, we'll be drinking champagne on a balcony in Dubai, and she'll be filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy." I didn't drop the orbital sander. I didn't storm up the stairs and put my fist through the drywall. My heart didn't even skip a beat. My name is Jacky O'Hara. I'm 34 years old, and I spent the last decade turning my late father's 3-man carpentry crew into O'Hara Developments, one of the most successful commercial construction firms in the state. I work in steel-toe boots and denim. My hands are rough with calluses. Julian, my chief financial officer, works in tailored Italian suits and wears a watch that costs more than my truck. When we met, I thought we were the perfect balance. The muscle and the math. The grit and the polish. Turns out, he was just a tick feeding on a very tired dog. People think having Irish blood means you have a hot temper. They think it means screaming matches, broken whiskey bottles, and thrown plates. They're completely wrong. The real Irish temper, the one my grandfather brought over from a dirt-floor cottage in Galway, is entirely silent. It's patient. It's a glacier. It measures you, calculates the cost of your sins, and builds a coffin to your exact specifications before you even know you're sick. I turned off the sander. I brushed the fine, red sawdust off my jeans, pulled the phone from my pocket, and hit record, holding the microphone flush against the monitor's speaker. "You're sure she doesn't suspect?" Chloe asked. "About us?" "Chloe, look at her," Julian scoffed. "She comes home covered in dust, eats dinner, and falls asleep at 9. She thinks I'm working late on the zoning appeals. She doesn't have the energy to suspect anything." I saved the audio file, uploaded it to a secure cloud server. Then, I walked up the stairs, let my face relax into a mask of exhausted contentment, and stepped into the kitchen. Julian was leaning against the marble island, drinking an iced espresso. Chloe was sitting on a bar stool, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. They looked like a magazine ad for the wealthy and carefree. "Hey, Jack," Julian smiled, stepping forward to kiss my cheek. He smelled like expensive cologne and mint. "How's the door coming?" "Getting there," I said smoothly, turning to the sink to wash my hands. I watched them in the reflection of the window. "Did you leave those Southside loan papers on my desk?" "I did," he said, not missing a single beat. His eyes were dead, calm, practiced. "Whenever you have a minute. No rush, but mister. Davis at the bank really wants to finalize by Friday so we can break ground next month. I'll look at them tonight." I promised, drying my hands on a towel. Chloe didn't even look up from her screen. "You work too hard, Jacky. You really need a vacation. You look exhausted." "You're probably right," I said, offering her a warm, older sister smile. Because what they didn't know was that I was about to give them a permanent one. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry, either. I sat in my home office with the door locked, drinking a mug of black tea, pulling up every financial record I had access to. I am not an accountant, but I know how to read a blueprint, and Julian had built a very sloppy house. I spent 7 hours tracing the numbers. He had been skimming off subcontractor invoices for over 14 months. 10 grand here for materials, 15 grand there for expedited shipping. He was filtering it into a dummy corporation called Apex Consulting. But the Southside loan was the kill shot. We were buying a massive commercial lot on the south side of the city. The loan was for $5 million. But looking closely at the fine print Julian had drafted, it wasn't a standard mortgage. It was a commercial lien collateralized against everything. My heavy machinery, my current real estate, the business accounts. If he drained the $5 million into his Malta shell company, O'Hara Developments would instantly default. The bank would seize everything my father and I had ever built. Julian wasn't just leaving me. He was making sure I couldn't survive his absence. The next morning, I drove into the city and parked outside a brick building that hadn't been updated since the 80s. I walked in and met with Maeve Gallagher. Maeve was a forensic accountant and a family friend. She had known my father since they were kids. She was 62 years old, wore sensible cardigans, drank her whiskey neat, and was utterly ruthless with a ledger. I played her the audio recording. I showed her my preliminary digging on Apex Consulting. Maeve took off her reading glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose, and looked at me. Her eyes were hard. "He's trying to gut you, Jacky. He's taking the organs and leaving the skin." "I know," I said. My voice was steady. "How do I gut him first?" Maeve cracked her knuckles. "We follow the blood. Leave your laptop here. Give me 48 hours. Over the next 4 days, I gave the performance of a lifetime." I realized that if they wanted to build a narrative of my blind, trusting ignorance, I should give them exactly what they wanted. On Tuesday, I brought Julian a cup of coffee in bed and apologized for working so much lately. I told him that once the Southside deal closed, we should take a trip. Just the two of us. He smiled, kissed my hand, and said he was already looking at flights. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't flinch. On Wednesday, Chloe came over for dinner. I cooked her favorite roast chicken and potatoes. I asked her about her graphic design classes. I told her I was so proud of how she was finding herself after our dad passed. She hugged me. A real, physical hug. And as she squeezed me, I thought about how she was planning to use my bankruptcy to fund her luxury condo in Dubai. Meanwhile, Maeve and my legal team were moving like a tactical unit in the shadows. On Thursday afternoon, Maeve called me into her office. She had 3 thick binders sitting on her desk. "We mapped the Malta LLC," Maeve said, opening the first binder. "We traced the IP addresses and the establishing signatures directly to Julian and Chloe. We found the luxury condo they've already pre-leased in Dubai. 6 months paid in advance, using the money skimmed from Apex Consulting. Is it enough for the police?" I asked. "Oh, it gets better," Maeve smirked. To set up the initial offshore accounts in Malta, Julian had to prove massive liquidity. He used his own personal collateral to open the accounts, but he didn't have enough. So, he forged your signature to leverage your personal private savings as a backup guarantee. My lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Harris who had joined us in the office, leaned forward. "That is wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny, Jacky. It's a federal offense. We can freeze him out completely right now." "No," I said. "If we hit him now, he scrambles. He hires a defense attorney. He drags it out in court for 3 years. I want him in a corner with no exits." "What's the play?" Harris asked. "Leave the South Side loan open," I said. "Let him think the trap is still perfectly set. But tonight, I want you to legally remove Julian from all company accounts. Place O'Hara Developments, all its assets, and my personal wealth into an irrevocable blind trust governed by a third-party board. And contact Arthur Davis." Arthur Davis was the bank manager handling the Southside loan. He was a good man, a man who had carried my father's casket. You want me to tell the bank? Harris asked. I want you to tell Arthur, I corrected. We need to draft a second fake set of loan documents for tomorrow. By Thursday night, my assets were titanium. Legally, Julian had access to absolutely nothing. He and Chloe thought I was a sheep walking willingly into the shearing shed. Friday morning arrived, the day of the signing. The day my life was supposed to end. I woke up, showered, and put on a dark green tailored suit. No denim today. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe knot. Julian met me in the lobby of the bank downtown. He was wearing a navy Tom Ford suit, looking like a man who had already won the lottery. Chloe was with him, playing the role of the supportive sister who just wanted to be there for my big milestone. You ready for this, babe? Julian asked, squeezing my hand as we waited for the elevator. More than you know, I replied. We walked into the massive glass-walled conference room on the top floor. Arthur Davis was sitting at the head of the long oak table. Next to him was a man in a gray, off-the-rack suit that Julian clearly didn't recognize. And standing quietly by the far window, arms crossed, were two uniformed city police officers. Julian stopped dead in his tracks. Chloe, walking right behind him, bumped into his back. Jacky, what's going on? Julian asked, his confident, practiced smile faltering at the edges. He looked at Arthur, then at the cops. Arthur, who are these people? Take a seat, Julian, I said. I didn't sit. I stood at the opposite end of the table, resting my hands flat on the polished wood. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a heavy red folder. I slid it across the glass so it stopped directly in front of his chair. This is the Southside loan, I said, my voice dead calm. The one you drafted. The one that places a $5 million lien against my company. The one you plan to instantly wire to a shell corporation in Malta the second the ink dries. Julian's face went the color of wet ash. Jacky, what are you talking about? And this, I continued, pulling out a second, thicker black folder and sliding it next to the first, is the forensic audit of O'Hara Developments, conducted by Maeve Gallagher. It details the $412,000 you've already embezzled from my subcontractors via Apex Consulting. It also contains the forged guarantee forms you submitted to open your offshore accounts. Chloe let out a sharp, panicked gasp. It sounded like a dog getting stepped on. She looked at the police officers, then at the door, realizing she was entirely trapped. Julian, she whimpered, stepping away from him. Julian held his hands up, trying to force a laugh. It came out sounding like a dry cough. Jacky, babe, someone is lying to you. Maeve is crazy. This is a massive misunderstanding. You're stressed about the project. You're not thinking clearly. Julian, I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room like freezing water. I am not a fool, and I am not a victim. I heard you on the baby monitor in the workshop. I know about Malta. I know about the condo in Dubai. I know about you and my sister. Silence slammed into the room. It was absolute and crushing. Chloe burst into tears, covering her face with her hands, sinking into one of the leather chairs. The man in the gray suit stood up. Julian Vance, I'm Senior Investigator Thomas with the State Financial Crimes Division. We have active warrants for your personal electronics, your vehicle, and your bank records. No, Julian whispered. He looked at me, the arrogant, untouchable CFO mask shattering into a million pieces. The panic in his eyes was pure, unfiltered terror. Jacky, please. We're married. You can't do this to me. I'll give the money back. I swear to God, we can fix it. You don't have the money to fix it, I said, leaning forward. Because yesterday afternoon, my attorneys filed an emergency injunction. Your personal accounts are frozen. The Malta account has been flagged by international authorities for wire fraud. The condo in Dubai has been canceled. You have absolutely nothing. Investigator Thomas nodded to the officers. Mister, Vance, put your hands behind your back. As the heavy steel cuffs clicked around his wrists, Julian's legs seemed to give out. The officers had to hold him up by his armpits. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Jacky, you're going to send me to federal prison over money? I'm sending you to prison because you tried to steal my father's legacy, I said, my voice as hard as concrete. You bit the hand that fed you, Julian. Now you can choke on it. They walked him out. He didn't say another word. Chloe was still sitting there, hyperventilating, her mascara running down her cheeks in thick black lines. She looked up at me, terrified, like a child waiting to be struck. Jacky, I'm so sorry. Please. He manipulated me. He told me you two were unhappy. He told me you didn't care about me. Save it, Chloe, I said, packing my folders back into my leather bag. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. Your mother has already been sent the audit and the audio recordings. She's changing the locks on the house. The credit cards are shut off. Your car lease was in the company's name, and it is being repossessed this afternoon. My advice? Start walking. She let out a wail, grabbed her purse, and ran out of the room, her heels clicking frantically down the hallway until the sound faded away. Arthur Davis sat at the head of the table, exhaling a long, slow breath. He took off his glasses and wiped them with a cloth. Well, your grandfather would have been incredibly proud of how you handled that, Jacky. My grandfather would have used a crowbar in a dark alley, I said, offering a faint, tired smile. I used a spreadsheet in a boardroom. Times change. I walked out of the bank and into the bright, cold morning air. My phone was already vibrating in my pocket with frantic messages from Julian's defense lawyer, from Chloe, from people in our social circle realizing the explosion had just gone off. I pulled the phone out, powered it down, and dropped it into my bag. I got into my truck and drove out to the south side lot. It was empty right now. Just raw dirt, diesel equipment, and stakes in the ground, waiting for steel and concrete. Waiting to be built into something that would last 100 years. They thought because I loved them, I was soft. They thought because I was quiet, I was blind. They forgot the most basic rule of construction. You can't build a skyscraper on soft dirt. You have to dig down deep. You have to scrape away the mud and the rot until you hit bedrock. It's dirty work. It's hard, exhausting, and lonely. But once you hit that bedrock, once you pour that foundation, nothing in the world can tear you down. I took a deep breath of the cold air, smelling the diesel and the damp earth. I felt entirely clean. Then, I put on my hard hat, walked out into the dirt, and went to work.